small draft here for the Minnesota Vikings. Started in the first round with Donovan Jackson at pick 24, another team that turned down the ability to pick up an extra 3 and next year's 3, presumably the same trade that the Texans got a pick later. So that the Vikings stayed and picked Donovan Jackson. Third round, Tai Felton, speed receiver out of Maryland. Tyrion Ingram Dawkins, the defensive lineman out of Georgia. Kobe King, linebacker out of Penn State. And Gavin Bartholomew, the tight end out of Pittsburgh. So they had a first rounder, third rounder, first pick of the 5th round, and then 2 6s is what Minnesota ended up here in the 5-player draft.
Feels a little bit like Cincinnati's draft, where it doesn't feel great, in part because of sort of where they put themselves, right, heading into the draft with the lack of draft picks and not doing a huge amount to recoup them. Listening to Kwesi explain that, I mean, he gave this golf analogy that didn't make a ton of sense to me, so I didn't love the explanation for why they didn't. Like, he basically said, look, you shank the driver into the rough, right? What do? When you become a good golfer, one of the first things you do is not turn a bad situation even worse, right? Eliminate the double and the triple bogeys by just taking out the iron and getting it back on the fairway. Don't try and do anything crazy and take the bogey. Accept that you've made a bad shot and take the bogey. So that was his logic for why they didn't take few draft picks, right? They've already traded away these draft picks and effectively make it worse by, doing something non-optimal. But I would argue that the thing to do when you've made that bad decision is to try and fix it by trading back and taking more draft picks back, like essentially offset. I think the safe thing to do is to trade back and try and stockpile draft picks, whereas he seemed to think the safe thing to do is to just take the top player on your board in Donovan Jackson. Some people think the Donovan Jackson pick itself was a reach, and relative to the consensus board, it was a bit of one. But we've been saying, that world between 25 and 40 in a draft it's all the same, right? It's not a reach when you're talking about that kind of difference. Donovan Jackson going at 24, given the offensive linemen that were going in the first round, given Tyler Booker going at 12, is fine. So that part is no, I have no problem with.
I don't know how Arif's calculating it, or people that are doing that. I mean, that should be calculated from like an exponential standpoint, right? Like if you have pick 3 and you take a guy that's 15 on the board, that's 12 spots, but that's a crazy reach. Whereas if you take somebody at 24 that's at 36, it's not, right? Because we know that those grades are always going to be a lot tighter at that point, right? It's a bell curve here. So I mean, I don't hate it as far as a reach. And I really think it was a lot of the guard run. I think what Kwesi's trying to describe there is Booker did go at 12 and Zabel did go at 18. And if those guys bumped down a few spots and they could have taken one of those guys at 24, maybe they would have played the long game and traded down just a little bit. Do you have something?
Yeah. I mean, I think so. My point overall is I think the pick in isolation is fine. I think given that we know trade offers were apparently on the table at that point, I think not taking one to move down is a mistake. Even if it would have meant losing on Donovan Jackson and getting a different player later on, I think it's still a move that they should have made to try and recoup a 2nd-round pick or another 3rd-round pick or whatever else was on the table. But they end up with this draft that's got a 1st-round pick, a 3rd-round pick, a 5th-round pick, and then 6th and 7th. And that's like, it's just hard to have a good draft in that scenario.
The Donovan Jackson pick just puts a bow, though, on this offseason overhaul of the interior offensive line for the Minnesota Vikings. So he'll come in, play left guard. They paid for Ryan Kelly at center. They paid for Will Fries at right guard. We know at the end of the season, Sam Darnold was under pressure. Sam Darnold was not playing well, but he was also under a lot of heat up front. And we also know that the Vikings have one of the better 1-2 punches at tackle, and they have for a while with Christian Darrisaw and Brian O'Neill. So the parallels, though, are interesting to me as far as what the Vikings have done on the offensive line and what division rival Bears have done on the offensive line. Of all the teams in the NFL, both have invested really heavily on the line. And I think that's what Kwesi was getting at, is like, let's put a bow on this offensive line overhaul, interior offensive line overhaul, and push a guy like Blake Brandel, last year's starter, to a backup role. And now you've got some depth, and that looks much better. Jackson, of course, played 7 or 8 games at guard, moved out to left tackle, had some issues early on against Abdul Carter after he moved to left tackle, but just got better and better and really held his own on Ohio State's playoff run there. So it's pretty good pass protector. He's fine in both gap and zone run blocking schemes. He's just a good all around prospect. I wouldn't be overly excited about taking Donovan Jackson in the first round as a guard, but like I get it, it's necessary in this draft where I think there's talent at other more valuable positions. But I get it. The Vikings are they stocked up on defensive talent over the last couple of years. They don't have massive needs. This is a plug and play player at probably their second biggest position of need behind maybe cornerback, if you want to argue that. Hey guys, just taking a quick break to tell you, hey, just over 50% of you are still unsubscribed to Check the Mic. It helps the channel. It helps to make sure that you don't miss any of our shows. So if you have a chance, hit the subscribe button right now.
Yeah, I mean, look, again, Donovan Jackson at this spot in isolation, in a vacuum, it's fine. I have no problem with it. I like Donovan Jackson as a prospect. I think he's a good player at guard. I think he can play tackle in a pinch, and that's valuable as well. But because they'd already done so much work on the offensive line, I don't know if it was that big a need. Like, yeah, Blake Brendel's not a good starter right now. Number one, he could potentially improve a little bit. We don't know. But number two, you can have one weak link. Like we've preached creep back toward average for years, right? They've already done that. They've got Ryan Kelly. They've got Will Fries. They've crept back toward average already. You can hide one below average starter out of 5 really easily, particularly when it's left guard. I mean, that's literally the easiest position on the entire offensive line to hide, I think, as a weakness. So I don't know that they needed to keep going and go get the answer at left guard to complete the complete set. And now we've got 5 guys that we're really comfortable with, particularly when you don't have those draft picks. Like if they had traded down, maybe gotten a guard in the second or the third round where we felt a little bit less good about him than Donovan Jackson, but could still theoretically upgrade that spot. And you've got an extra pick to play with that you can then go and add a cornerback at a position, that I think is of greater need. I would feel better about it. So it's just the way the Vikings played this draft. I think it's just tough to rank it too highly.
No, I get that part. I agree with that. So 5 total picks. Tai Felton in the third. He's fast. Speed receiver. He was outstanding at the Senior Bowl. Right, he's fast. Play strength at the catch point. Even though again at the Senior Bowl he made some nice catches. I thought he reminded me a little bit of Tyquan Thornton from Baylor a couple years ago, where I thought he was fast but knocked off his route and a little inconsistent. Maybe a little bit stronger than Thornton. Thornton had some serious issues at the catch point. He went, and by the way, Thornton went in the second, and I thought he was more of a 4th or 5th round player. I think Felton's probably better than that. So. The intriguing thing here is you have a loaded group of pass catchers, but not a guy that can just be a take the top off the defense type of player. And if that's just what Tai Felton does, that could be pretty good value in the third.
Yeah, he's fast. He's pretty tall and long. He's got route running chops, but he's bad at the catch point in every possible way. Like he drops the ball. He had 8 drops last season. He's awful in contested catch situations. Like he's just not like he's that style of wide receiver, right? And again, I mean, there's value to having a guy that's fast and can run routes and get open. Even in this offense where they've already got a couple of guys that fit that mold, if you were going to go wide receiver at that point in the draft, I would have been targeting different receivers. So don't hate the draft pick in terms of who they or the position they brought in. Felton's an interesting player. I don't dislike him, but I definitely would have been choosing a different receiver if I was grabbing that spot.
Little over 6 foot, runs a 4.37, good explosive numbers as far as the vertical and the broad. So yeah, I think he's a deep threat possibility. And then beyond that, Kobe King, linebacker out of Penn State, pretty good run defender, could get good value there in the 6th round. And then Tyrion Ingram Dawkins, again, more of like a big bodied edge hybrid type of player up front out of Georgia that adds to the defensive line rotation in the 5th. Anything else on the Minnesota Vikings draft?
Yeah, so it's like the players that they've selected, I think, are fairly middle of the road and nondescript or average draft picks. Their draft grade gets kind of defined by how you think they played the game, right? Like because they came into the draft effectively behind the 8 ball with having traded away so many picks already. How do you think they did given that starting point? And I think there were opportunities there to do it a different way that I would have preferred, but this is the way they did it.
Yeah. I mean, my bias in here is none of Kobe King I get in the 6th round. I mean, there's none of those players that I particularly liked relative to the other players on the board. Not that it matters. Yeah. It's like, but that's just my preference. But I understand Jackson and I understand the fit for Felton there in the 3rd and how they're going to use him. Right. So I get that. I get those 2 picks, but I probably would have gone other ways with both of them.
Agreed.
Because I would have taken the trade down. The Donovan Jackson thing, like I said, is the drop off at guard was probably significant, and I think that influenced them to stay at 24 and not take the extra threes, where we had predicted the Vikings to be the most likely team to trade down because they only had a handful of picks coming in, and they decided to stay.
Yeah, and I guess the Felton thing is particularly around that point in the third round. I think some really good receivers were going. Like Kyle Williams went 5 picks into the third round. Jalen Noel went a few picks before the Tai Felton pick. So admittedly, they went before, right? But the point is, like, when you're sort of looking at the players that were flying off the board at that point, Tai Felton, I think, didn't quite belong in the same category as those guys.
Thanks for watching all the way to the end of our video.
For more great content, click here to subscribe and here to watch another video. We'll see you again soon.